coming in. That's brilliant. Right, well, greetings. It is now afternoon, so good afternoon, one and all. This is the third session of day 2 of Local GovCamp 2020, and I'm pleased to have Adam and a group of co-conspirators who are going to be talking about, and it's not as much a talk but a panel discussion around the local community service and open place directory. We've still got people coming in at the moment, Adam, so I'm going to just pass over to you while I go and let them in.
Okay.
If you want to do your intro.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Nick. I'm going to share my screen for the first part of this session, so let's just make sure I can work out how to do this. So hopefully everyone can see a predominantly green screen. Excellent, good stuff. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adam Harris. I'm the product owner for Open Place Directory. Before I introduce the panel for this session, I'm just going to take a few moments to set the scene. I also need to remind everyone, I think Nick might have done as well, that this session is being recorded. Hopefully everyone's okay with that, but obviously you have the option of turning your camera off if you don't want to be recorded. I'm going to start with reference to the advertised title for this session. I just noticed about half an hour ago on the registration page that there's an S missing from the end of community services. So if you've joined the session hoping for a discussion about court-ordered, non-custodial criminal sanctions, I should apologise in advance for any confusion. Of course, you're very welcome to stay. Secondly, Open Place Directory. This is the name of the software that PlaceCube provide in order to facilitate the collection, assurance and maintenance of Open Referral UK compliant service data. And whilst I expect it may be referenced during the session, that's not the primary focus for this hour. I will of course take the opportunity to encourage you all to find out more via the partner pages on the event website and via our own website, where you'll find a number of resources, including a product tour and a chance to test some of the data collection volunteer functionality. But for now, let's pop that in brackets. So a revised title with track changes. Hopefully no one feels like they're here under false pretenses. What we will be focusing on during this session is open data for local community services and the Open Referral UK data standard. PlaceCube have been working with the organisations represented today over the last 2 years to enable implementation of open data models aligned to the Open Referral UK data standard in order that consumers of the data, be they social prescribers, frontline care workers or service users, can have a better chance of finding what they need and have greater level of confidence in the information that they find. Our panel today is made up of 5 people I have a huge amount of respect for due to the work they do, their vision and the passion they apply day in, day out to bring that vision to life. It's a genuine privilege to be able to work so closely with them all, and I'm thrilled and incredibly grateful that they've all made the time to join this session. I will say an extra thank you also to Ken from Blackburn with Darwin, who stepped up at the 11th hour to fill a gap in the panel caused by illness. Each of our panel members is shortly going to take 5 minutes to introduce themselves and talk about the work they and their organisations are doing. There will be an opportunity once all 5 have spoken for you to ask questions. Please submit your questions through the chat channel and I'll do my best to pick them up as we go. If there are any questions we don't have time to address today, we will capture them and respond to you via other means. I think that's enough from me. I think the scene is suitably set. So I'm going to hand over to our first panel member, who is Mike Thacker from Pourism. Mike is representing LG Inform Plus and the Open Referral UK data standard.
Thanks, Adam. So I'm Mike from Pourism Limited. We're a small software company, and amongst other things, we're technical partners to the Local Government Association, the LGA, and in that capacity, we do a lot of work under Tim Adams of the LGA, who's also on this call, helping local authorities share open data and publish it in a standardized and reusable way. we've been working over the last year with the LGA on a pilot addressing services which will help alleviate loneliness in local authorities. And in doing so, we've matured a standard for sharing open services data, which is a standard that the Open Place Directory conforms to. The underlying driver for this, and I think probably the driver for lots of local GovCamp sessions, is a local digital declaration, which the majority of councils, I think, have signed up to, but have not necessarily been able to implement the spirit of yet. And I often quote this particular phrase from that declaration that people have signed up to, which is insisting on a modular way of building up IT systems, so you don't buy in this monolith of a system which you're tied to, whether it be a Microsoft CRM or something else. And you can swap in and out individual parts. So Adam, yeah, if you do go on to that next slide, you'll see that this is how I illustrate that in the local digitals fix the plumbing terminology. And we've implemented the Open Referral UK standard, which is a standard way of interchanging information pertaining to services through that work with the LGA, such that you can implement a service directory from PlaceCube, as Bristol, Blackburn with Darwen and Elmbridge have, or from Public Consulting Group, as Hull have, or not in that diagram, a family services directory from FutureGov, as Buckinghamshire County Council have, or a number of others that are currently in development. And you can interchange these service directories with front-end service finder tools, such as the Doc&T one that's provided for Bristol, or a VidaVia open source one that has been published through that product, or a number of others. So the concept is you can buy a standards compliant directory and you can swap that in and out as suits your need. And hence we introduced this fluidity into the market for adopting service directories, and we let the best of breed come to the fore. In the work we've done, we've not added another standard, but we've brought together standardization work by the LGA and by the local digital project, which I think was initiated by Ben Cheetham, who's also on the call, and brought together their recommendations to build on the international open referral standard for interchanging services data. So we have a standard that formally complies with that, but adds extra bits, which the likes of PlaceCube have identified as being needed to make a directory work in the context of finding services across a place in the UK. I'll probably stop at that. Thanks, Adam.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mike. Like I said earlier, there will be an opportunity for questions once all of our panel members have introduced themselves. So I'm next going to hand over to Linda Vernon from the Lancashire and South Cumbria Integrated Care System.
Thanks, Adam. Are you moving slides on? I can still see Mike's. So a little bit of a whistle-stop tour really of how we're adopting the standards to support social prescribing. I work for Lancashire and South Cumbria Integrated Care System, and we're a partnership of 8 CCGs, 5 acute trusts, 4 upper tier and 4 local district local authorities, along with a number of voluntary community and faith sector and social enterprise organisations that we estimate are probably providing about 10,000 services across the region. The makeup of that is that we work across 5 integrated care partnerships, but when we talk about place-based care, that's sort of care that's delivered across our 44 primary care networks. So essentially we're a very complex system with lots of different stakeholders, but social prescribing is one of the sort of strands that runs through everything. If you want to flip on to the next. So our digital strategy, and it was lovely hearing about the local digital declaration from Mike, because essentially the architecture principles that I've put on the bottom there are sort of in the same stream of thought, really. Our digital strategy centres around the people that we serve and provide services for. So everything that we do in terms of integrating services and managing our system more effectively is all about empowering the person. And co-design is something that we're really passionate about. We're doing some co-design work on some of the standards adoption that we're doing, particularly with a SEND cohort at the moment. So parents of people with special educational needs are doing some co-design with us. The section there about empowering our frontline, we're really thinking about empowering our widest stakeholder frontline. So that includes carers, unpaid volunteers, it includes our librarians, it includes our VCFS partners. It's not just about clinical staff or indeed local government staff, social workers, etc., being able to engage in social prescribing. Data is something that's really sort of driving our transformation. We're very actively involved in population health management, and if we're going to be able to target interventions appropriately to people, we need to know what services are out there, regardless of how we find those services. You can flick on. So click on again. So social prescribing, it's a bit of a buzzword at the moment in NHS land, but it's something that's been going on for decades. And the NHS England model is very much around primary care and link workers being the social prescribers. We see it that the one on the right is much more our sort of approach to social prescribing than just a primary care pathway. So we just see it as being a process that connects people with non-medical community interventions, enabling them to manage their lives better. And as such, we're very passionate about making sure that every possible means of connecting people with those services is enabled and opened up for them. And like the quote in the centre says, it's about a personalised approach to support people to live their daily lives better using all the community assets around them. You can flick on. So the complexity of a system that's supporting 1.8 million people is that we have different products that are supporting the social prescribing and enabling the social prescribing process in different parts of our region. Some of them are homegrown, so Compass and ReferNet are homegrown products. Elemental is probably a more well-established and well-known social prescribing platform. But the others, DrLink and iPlato, are primary care tools that allow people to book an appointment with a GP, but also allow people to be triaged to a community service if it's more appropriate. And I think Mike referred to the SiteKit, which is the eRed book provider that allows parents to be able to find community services. And then finally, we know that there are front doors that, yeah, stay there, that the public will want to access. And we see social prescribing, the ultimate sort of empowerment of people is that they can find services themselves without being signposted by anyone. So we know that some of our front door directories and a product that we're working to launch shortly, the Orb app, can help people to have these services in their back pocket as long as the services are as long as the data about the services is reliable. So if you move on to the last one, given that we have the complex, and that was only some of the examples of the products that we're using and the front door tools that we use, we are currently piloting the adoption of the standards using PlaceCube to host, or open, I'd never get it right, I call it PlaceCube, the open place-based, whatever. What is it, Adam? Thank you. I just always say PlaceCube. So the PlaceCube's hosting our federated data lake, which we're piloting at the moment. We have, given the complexity of the system, we have a number of assurers. We have a number of front door products, the ones in the section on the right here that I've just alluded to some of them. And for us, the ultimate sort of measure of success is that our citizens, carers, and professionals, so anyone accessing the data, is assured that the data is current, up to date, reliable, and that it's a single version of the truth, allowing us to commission services more effectively. So we're working on developing a commissioner dashboard that will help us to match needs and circumstances at population level to the services available. And we're looking at some cool gizmos like a language translator as well. And I think that's my quick whistle stop tour over.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Linda. Next, I'm going to hand over to Kenneth Barnsley, who is a consultant in public health at Blackburn with Darwen Borough Council.
Hi, morning, good afternoon to you all. Yeah, I'm Ken Barnes, I'm a consultant in public health in the Public Health Department, Blackburn with Darwen Council. And it's an absolute pleasure to talk about something other than COVID right now, because we've been entrenched in trying to manage that pandemic over the past 6 months. We're now into the 29th week of lockdown. But this afternoon, I'm just going to tell you about 5 things as part of the process that we've gone through in Blackburn with Darwen and with our colleagues in Pennine, Lancashire and across Lancashire to get to the point where we are now. Back in 2017, just want to recap our objectives. We came up with a way of thinking about social prescribing and the data and those systems that we might need. And we had 5 objectives. One was about data creation, guardianship and assurance of that data. The second was to develop a storage system to store all that data effectively and share it. Thirdly, we wanted to make that data available to our practitioners and clinicians. Fourthly, we wanted to make that data available to residents. And the 5th thing, we wanted to recognise that in our population, very deprived population in Blackburn with Darwen, 50% in the most, 20% deprived of the whole of the country. Big problems with literacy. We wanted to create an ethical front-end bot. Now, I'm a consultant in public health. I'm a public health person. I'm not a digital systems person. So we had these 5 objectives. We didn't really know how we were going to do it, but just looking back, we've now got the first 4 of those pretty much in place. So it's taken 3 years or so. We've had a pandemic in the middle, but I think we've made great progress on those. But I think one of the lessons from that is that you have to start somewhere. And I think this is some of the lessons from lots of our programs at the moment, that you've got to start by doing something. So in Blackburn with Darwen, when we were thinking about the organisations we wanted to work with, we had 2 council departments who were really keen. Our wellbeing service, who'd already got a kind of a database of some stuff that was going on in communities, community walks, low impact, strength and balance classes, those sorts of things, as well as the kind of formalised leisure provision. We had our neighbourhoods department, our sustainable neighbourhoods department, who have a network across our 4 neighbourhoods in Blackburn with Darwen of people working with communities, each of whom knows a lot personally about the resources and assets that are available there in the community, but don't always write it down. So, you know, there's a kind of a potential system failure there if they leave or go on to other things. The third was we wanted to work with community and voluntary sector organisations because we saw them as the key. But at that time, we couldn't work with them all. So we worked with CVS and a local provider called Care Network, who've been really, really good. And along the way, they've always been willing to try something different. So with those 4 organisations, we started off trying to pull this project together. And I think critical to all of this was they all had their own data. They all kept it in different ways. Some of it's written down, some of it's in spreadsheets, some of it's in people's heads. So critical to all of this was the data standard. And I think what it really did practically in Blackburn with Darwen was it got those organisations working together to share data. And that wasn't always an easy thing. We'd had, you know, austerity and cuts to community and voluntary sector organisations' budgets, and they were all actually quite competitive with one another. But they saw the opportunity to share data, because if they share their data to a standard, the benefit they get is other people's data to that same standard, and creating that, what Linda now calls the data lake. I'm not sure, that sounds a little bit damp to me, but there we go. So we ended up, and in the end, our wellbeing service weren't really able to share their data. They've got a proprietary system which didn't lend itself to getting APIs to drag the data out, so that didn't really work. Our neighbourhoods department were very, very keen and still are, and they shared their data initially on spreadsheets, and we've started to pull that together. And using PlaceCubed as a way to get that data in there to that set standard, I think was really, really important. And I think critical to all of this is making sure that what we developed fitted within the system that was developing. There's been a huge transformation in health and social care. Our 4 neighbourhoods in Blackburn with Darwen and across Lancashire, neighbourhoods are working to PCNs, primary care networks. So those are the places where all the practitioners, clinicians and community and voluntary sector work together to support residents in terms of their health and well-being. And something like this, which we visioned, was just what was needed to support them. So that's the position that we're at now. That was the position we were in back in February. Then COVID intervened and we're just starting to raise our heads above the parapet now and starting to get those primary care networks working back again. And I think just to emphasize then before I finish is the data standard really is critical to all of this. All of these organizations had data previously. They kept it in their own way, so it couldn't be shared consistently. So now what we've got is the potential, and it's developing to create that data warehouse, data lake that enables them to all contribute and all draw out a greater level of data, with front ends to be created for specific target groups, for carers, for people with learning difficulties, and as Linda says, things like the e-Red book that can make it available to new parents. So I think we've progressed well. There's a lot more to be done, but there's a great potential there, and for me, the data standards are absolutely critical to that.
Excellent, thank you, Ken. I'm now going to pass on to Kevin Peltonen-Messenger, who is Chief Executive Officer at the Care Forum.
Thanks, Adam. You always make my surname sound more interesting than it is, which is delightful. Just as I guess as an aside, I've got a history in criminal justice, so if we do go back to the original title, I'm happy to lead a conversation on orders. Anyhow, so yeah, I'm Kevin. I'm the CEO of an organisation based in the Southwest called the Care Forum. Ultimately, our goal as an organisation is to support inequality groups and to communicate and create dialogue with groups of organisations and individuals, and support them to have access to system change, and to support them to have access to networks and decision-making panels that support system change regionally. So whether it's Healthier Together or STP boards, whatever it might be, that's our main function. In respect of what we would call our IAG contract, information, advice and guidance, we've had a long history with this, and hearing some of the discussions today and thinking about it last night, it's very much like the forming of a universe. We've come from an element of chaos, as I see it, in respect of data, where, as we've just heard, data exists in people's minds, on the back of envelopes, on pin boards, and it feels like a really important process to go through and try to quantify and ensure that data is clean and accessible to people. So that's I guess more of how I feel about the process. We've run our IAG service for over, well, coming up to 10 years now, service called WellAware. In the early days, it was data that we thought was important. Then it became data that our stakeholders believed to be important. And now it's very much more co-produced from local authorities, Bristol and South Gloucestershire, from stakeholder groups and from individuals who are able to let us know about what data is important to them. So the process we're currently in, we're going through a process of data cleanse and assurance, and making sure that the data we have is, as best as it can be, pertinent and up to date. And I think that's one of the challenges we manage internally, is how to create and publish data that is both manageable but also usable. I think that's the really important point, and it's definitely our focus in developing our IAG system, is about ensuring that the data that we have is clean, but it can be used by the public through an interface that is clean and accessible. Alongside that, our IAG system has our information, advice and guidance system. We have telephone operators as well. So we've got a set of people who are actively engaged in training the system, volunteer assurers, and engaging with the public to make sure that the way we present data and the type of data we hold is relevant. in the southwest, Bristol and South Gloss, we've got about 4,000 charities that are registered to date. So there's a huge amount of work that's being done across the region. And so you can imagine going through a process of data cleansing and ensuring that all of those organisations' will and aspiration is represented in an accessible, clean way is an interesting task. I'll keep it as interesting, given that we're being recorded. But it's definitely a task that is that's bearing fruit for us and enabling the sector to engage in a conversation about what data means to them. So I won't bore you anymore with what we're doing in Bristol. I'll hand back to Adam.
That's great. Thanks, Kev. Appreciate that. Last of our panel to introduce themselves then is Ian Singleton, Northern Digital Catalyst at Digital Gaps.
Thank you, Adam. Last and probably least. So I'm from Digital Gaps. Just quickly, Digital Gaps has got 3 main focuses: working with the public and third sector, while the slides come up, public and third sector to define problems that solve a digital product. Then working with our collective partners to build that digital product, and then finally providing consultancy to implement that product. And I still not nice.
Are you not seeing your slides? But let me quickly sort that out.
This is not in my 5 minutes, Adam. Oh.
How's that?
I can't see anything now. Can anybody else see anything?
I can see the slide now. Implementation.
Implementation help, hopefully people can see.
Yeah, I can see that.
I can see that, but it's not my slide. But just move on one. Let's make sure the next one's there. Right, okay. Just bring them all down, Adam. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so leave it there. Right, okay, so my 5 minutes can start now. So I've just explained what Digital Gaps do, and that's what we've done really with the Open Place directory, working with Bristol and PlaceCube to develop that product. And then what I'm going to talk about for hopefully just 5 minutes is more about the implementation. And I've just got 8 pointers that I'm going to come to in a second, but I just thought I'd put this slide up now because it's probably more useful than what I'm going to say. So the LGA have done a report helping to tackle loneliness through open data, and it's about the open referral. So the link's there, but if you go to page 43, there is an appendix on project management artifacts, and there's quite a lot of information in there that will help you with your implementation. So I'm just recommending people have a look at that. And there's also a little report about user stories about why this open referral is useful. So I'll point people to that. If you move to the next slide, hopefully this will fall down. I've just got 8 points to try and whiz through. So these are just pointers from me in the experience of working with Lancs and Bristol in actually implementing this product. So point 1, ensure it's the problem that drives the solution. I guess it's a bit of a cliche. Don't let technology drive the project, tails wagging the dog, etc. We're all used to that. But because we've got an open data solution, then the temptation is there to push open data standards as it's the right thing to do. And it probably is. But I just want to say it won't create a new way of working or get things in business as usual unless it solves real problems. So my recommendation is to find a Ken or a Linda, understand their problems, and then solve them with the technology available. Point number 2, Adam. Why should we make the effort? We probably all know this. We're currently wasting an awful lot of public money through inefficient collection of local service information, and rarely will a service directory be confident in how reliable their data is, and the front line's often confused of where to get the information and what they can trust. We're all after, as what Linda said, the single source of truth. And we can solve it with open data, but to be fair, it could be solved in other ways. However, a key benefit to doing this, which is currently a bit of a difficult sell, is that providing a machine readable or a digitally processable local service information is a fundamental digital building block that should enable lots of opportunity to improve support at the front line in lots of different ways. So we know about council service directories. Linda's mentioned social prescribing, dashboards for sufficiency of demand, and there's a whole new world coming of self-care application for citizens. So it's key that we do make this effort. Point 3, no point having a good data standard if the data is unreliable. Great to move everybody to open referral, but useless if we can't trust the data. So we've got to have some form of assurance activity that includes accountability. One of the primary reasons why there are so many directory of services in the same geographical area is trust. No organisation can rely on another organisation keeping the data they want up to date, and so they have to collect it themselves. Logical, but not a great model. So to get this trust, then there's a need for some form of memorandum of understanding that will provide that assurity, that reliability. Point 4, people want services appropriate to their needs and circumstances. Google is the first answer that people will say, I'll use that to find support services. But generally, this is a keyword approach, so you need to know what you're looking for. Open referral offers opportunities for data hooks based on people's circumstances and needs, so that we can be a bit more specific and appropriate to those needs and suggest services. It's got eligibility data in there to avoid suggesting things that people are not entitled to. There's session data in there so you can be quite specific what is available on a Tuesday afternoon. But the whole point of this is that you need to have the data, the rich data, complete, and it's worth considering that as part of your assurance agreement to make sure it's completed. Point 5, the benefits will be to the whole rather than the parts. What I'm saying is be very aware that asking a specific context to use an open data standard is going to cause them problems. They might need to change their applications, their user interface, their databases. They might even be happy with the data they've got. And should they care about the benefits to the whole place? Yes, in theory, but at the moment, the reality is that people are looking to survive first and then collaborate. So we need to find the win-wins for them. Point 6, he's getting there. Point 6, the key to this success is in identifying the operational wins. So as I said in point 1, it can't be technology-led, and therefore we need to find the wins with the operational managers. And they need to drive this, but not in their silos. We need to find ways to align them. Commissioners play a key role here because they will want to look across the place. We've got to look for things like, are there 2 applications that the same operational area wants to put data into? Can the burden of collection and maintenance be shared? Does one organisation want to focus on collecting and maintaining and others focus on consuming the data? We need to find these win-wins so that we can create that place-based approach, and obviously the data standard allows us to do that. Point 7, getting suppliers on board is going to accelerate everything. So one of the biggest barriers I've already mentioned, existing systems and data. There might be a need to migrate the data, change user interfaces, etc. And getting the suppliers on board will make this easier, much easier. Speak to Mike, he's mentioned they've got a community group in LGA to help suppliers. You might even consider saying to suppliers, don't worry about collecting the data. You could use PlaceCube's open place directory right across the bottom and just let them collect and maintain the data and let everybody else just focus on consuming the data. Lots of different contexts, so the difference can be made in better features for frontline and self-care. So let the suppliers work in that front end to make a difference to people's lives and leave the back end to PlaceCube. Last point. Point 8, this can't be a one-off exercise. It's got to be continuous and sustainable. Lots of examples of people making effort to do this, and then the data gets out of date, 3 or 4 months later. We've got to recognize that collecting and assuring the data costs time, money, resources, but at the same time, we've got to recognize that there's an awful lot of benefits with having reliable data that we can pass to the frontline workers and even for citizen self-care. So a means for maintaining the data has to be found as part of that assurance MOU I mentioned earlier, and starting off, establish a baseline of the duplication, the accuracy, the effort and the frustrations that are already there right at the start, and this will help you in developing that sustainability case. but we have to have that business case for sustainability. Otherwise, this is just not worth bothering. And my last point, good luck.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ian. And thank you all of you for those introductions, and thank you for keeping broadly within the agreed timescales as well, which gives us 20 minutes to move on to Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see the chat. Hopefully. It looks like there's quite a bit of activity in there. Just see if there's any, are there any questions that anyone's noticed? I've not seen these while we've been presenting. Just while I'm looking for those, I'm just going to ask a question just in terms of, I think I'll probably point this at Ken and Linda in the first instance, but others are free to join in as well, just in terms of getting buy-in from senior leadership and other stakeholders. Any particular challenges and any suggestions how that could be addressed?
Shall I go first, Ken? Or
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So I suppose one of the challenges that I face in my role that's less of a concern in Ken's patch is the complexity of the system and the amount of system leaders we need to get buy-in from. But I think it goes back to what Ian said. It's about people understanding what the benefits are to them. So we've been trying across our pilots to articulate the benefits to the end user, the benefits to the frontline staff, the benefits to the organisation, and the benefits to the system. And if you've clearly outlined the benefits, then people really do start to understand the model. I think it's probably more challenging on the ground than it is getting the senior buy-in, because once people realise that a single version of the truth that can be pushed to loads of different front doors that both our public and our professionals and our volunteers can access, knowing that it's reliable data, it's a kind of a win-win situation. There's no need to do much more than that. But then it's trying to get the assurers to understand what the benefits are to them. So I think it's just all about being really clear about what's in it for you and what matters to you, whether you're a system leader or a frontline member of staff.
Yeah, and I think I'd add to that. Getting the buy-in from senior people, I don't think is particularly difficult. Getting the resources from them to back it up, I think, is particularly difficult at the moment. In our kind of progress through the whole of this thing, and all of the others who've been working on this, Tim Adams and others and Mike have seen that local authorities haven't been prepared to put the resource into this. The NHS has now taken up social prescribing in a big way, which means some of the resources have started to flow a little bit. But I think critical to it is actually, and this was the bit I was trying to get across in my opening, is about getting the people who are actually going to be using it. So for me, the people at the front line, so it's the community and voluntary organisations, it's the primary care networks and primary care neighbourhoods to see the value of it, which they do. But then there's a critical need for resources to make it happen along the way, I think. The senior leaders, so in our own authority, Chief Exec, Director of Digital and Business Change, Director of Public Health, Director of Adult Social Care are also, great idea. But at the moment, in a time of austerity when we've been developing this, the resources haven't flowed from them. And that's the area where we've had to bid for additional resources, look for support from Linda through the Digital Lancashire in South Cumbria, and try and bid in. LGA put some resource into it. It was fabulous, but there hasn't been a great resource at present. But the support at policy level is there.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. Anyone want to add anything to that? So if anyone has any questions they want to ask, don't necessarily need to type them through the chat. Welcome to unmute yourselves, turn your videos on and share any questions. So in the meantime, just going to, I think initially for Mike, Ian, Kevin might want to add afterwards as well, just in terms of, I think some of this was covered off during the introductions about how we ensure good quality data is maintained. So Mike, are you okay to pick that one up? So updates by
Yeah.
service owners can be unreliable, for example.
Yeah, it's a kind of non-technical question that I get posed continually, and I kind of cringe when I see some people set up a directory and say, you know, we've made the update public so people can maintain their own data and we don't have to do anything from now. And I come across, as I think others have alluded to, you know, councils with half a dozen or even 13 is the most I've heard of directories of dubious quality. And the work of Digital Gaps has kind of guided me that there are 3 ways to maintain records. There are the large service providers whom you can trust to look after their own data. There are volunteers who will submit data that's worth looking at but needs to be verified. And then there are organizations like the Care Forum that just need to go out and collect it themselves. And it's a combination of those 3. And I always point people to the well-aware Bristol example and say that it's worth paying once to get your data right rather than paying 13 times for an effort and paying for a sort of task and finish project that you somehow think will go on after the money's gone away. Ian mentioned a memorandum of understanding with these suppliers. I suppose I'd go further and say a service level agreement, which guarantees a certain level of quality. I think well-aware's data is verified at least quarterly, and say, look, you know, you're paying for the service, and community and voluntary organisations often see the data as being what they own, and hence are reluctant to make it open. So another argument for paying people to maintain it is saying, look, we're paying you to make good quality data open. Your product is not the data, but it's your service and your guarantees around that.
Thanks, Mike. Kevin, you're in the hot seat for this kind of stuff. Have you got anything you want to add to that?
I love a good hot seat question. I think all of what's been said is correct. I think there's so many inefficiencies with multiple agencies collecting their own personal data that is often out of date by the time it's, you know, the inks hit the page. We've in the new contract we've got with Bristol City Council, we've developed a new website, a new well-aware website that isn't live yet, but the service level agreements we have in place are agreed and they're much tighter than they have been before. And I think, you know, I think for me, there's a real battle between having lots of data that is accessible, but the quality to it is questionable. And I often think within the sector, people think having more data is helpful, and balancing that with having less data that is of a higher quality and of a better usability. And I think that's part of the journey we're on at the moment with our partner organisations and other stakeholders, is really trying to quantify what level of data is helpful, how that's helpful for both a service perspective and an individual perspective, and yeah, as has been discussed, you know, making sure that data is regularly quality assured, so that telephone numbers are up to date. There's another side for me though that I think. For me, you know, the cleanliness of data is important, but some of the organisations that we promote through WellAware are never going to meet the type of standard that that commissioners sometimes want or external stakeholders want, because it's hyper-local, volunteer-led groups. And I think there's something about being, you know, understanding what the mandatory fields are and having an aspiration of obtaining quality data and maintaining quality data without losing data that is helpful on a community level. So it's a balancing act, and you know, it's definitely a learning journey for us at the Care Forum and through WellAware. But I think ultimately we'll end up in a place where data is just more helpful for everybody, and you know, part of that narrative is normalizing people's approach to using somebody else's data, which is often how it's seen. You know, it's we're really clear. WellAware isn't our data; it's just where we facilitate access to it. but there's definitely localized and community-based kind of territory around who owns what data and why it's important to them. So there's definitely a wider discussion about how we build that trust and change perception on that.
Brilliant, thank you. And just while you're in the hot seat, Kevin, just picking up on Lee's questions, Lee Emery from the chat. Looks like trying to get a better feel for what this looks like for an end user and also further up the chain. So do you want to, obviously without going into too much detail, sharing screens, because we can do that separately, but just talk about the front end that the Doc and T have developed, how that works for users, and then we can work backwards along the chain from there.
Yeah, sure. So we've worked with Doc and T for almost 10 years now, and it's a mobile first app, so it works as well as it does on telephones as it does on computers. And it's the new iteration of the website will be very much based around a really clear search function. I think our current website, it served a purpose, it's been really helpful, but it's often quite busy, and there are lots of layers that are duplicated. Our new website is a really clean search function, much like an Airbnb or a similar website where it's search and find rather than search and then search again. It uses browser loud. We have an opportunity to tie interpreters in through that process if people are calling and English isn't their first language. And that really is our aim, to make data as accessible as it possibly can be, and whilst ensuring that data is kind of quality driven.
Excellent, thanks Kevin. And I think as Mike's pointing out also in the chat, that pulls its data through a number of web services through APIs, just thinking back to Mike's plumbing slide from earlier, showing how all of the applications fit together, all based on the data standard. From a PlaceCube perspective, there's an application that sits behind that, which gives users the opportunity to manage that data at the back end, to assure that data, to collect that data, and to choose which elements of that data can be published. I'm happy to have a more detailed conversation about that offline, or like I said at the beginning of the call, to point you to various resources on the website and also within the partner area for this event. So hopefully, Lee, that helps for the time being, but feel free to ask any further questions. Or if anybody else, we've got looks like 6 or 7 minutes left, if anybody else has anything they want to ask. I'm imagining there's a dozen or so stomachs rumbling behind those off microphones, being the lunchtime. Yes, Ian.
You never give me a chance to answer before. So if I just picking up the point that Mike made and Kevin about this assurance, I think we all understand the open referral, not straightforward, but getting the reliable data is absolutely key. So one thing that in our experience so far, and it's emerging, is accountability. So it's back to that trust. It's back to, why should the police or the housing association trust the council's data, and they don't at the moment. So that MOU, that SLA is key. But one of the things that we found is accountability. So at the moment, open referral as a data set tells you the last time it was assured, but PlaceCube have implemented in their OPD also the email address of the assurer, which puts some accountability in the record. We're putting that forward as a candidate for open referral going forward. And it's that accountability that holds a lot. So when you go to a service directory and say, is your data up to date, they're not too sure who's accountable. It might be them or it might be the service provider. Now we're going to say, right, the person whose name is against this record is accountable, that should be as up to date as possible. And as Kevin mentioned about, the hyperlocal services, so in Lancashire, we're looking at, that assurance in 3 levels. We want to get to the stage of trusting every service provider to keep it up to date themselves. They will be accountable for their own data. We know that's probably possible for 60, even 70% of the data. But then you start getting to those hyperlocal services, and it's a bit more of a different picture. So taking, taking that assurance role on, then we've got the opportunities for someone to be a proxy for the customer. So Nellie's knitting service might be all the data is put on by the assurer. But there may be some services who are happy to do it but just don't keep it up to date very often, and we've got a section there for monitoring the data, where assurer will just do a light touch to keep an eye on things. So you've got the trusted service providers, you've got those that need monitoring, and those where you're going to have to be a proxy. But until we've got that layer with accountability, then the trust is just not going to be there. Once you put that in, then there is no reason why these front-end applications and different organizations can start to say, we can consume that data and put it into whatever web application that we want.
Thanks, Ian, and apologies for gagging you earlier. I didn't realise I'd done that. Just quickly though, Ian's raised an interesting point there. I think this is for Mike, just about the evolution of the data standard and local extensions, national extensions. Is it worth just spending a couple of minutes?
Yeah. As I think Ian mentioned, the LGA has convened a group of, I guess, leading suppliers, of whom PlaceCube is one, to keep the standard alive and, as it were, take ownership of it. We're very keen that everything is backwards compatible with Open Referral International and Open Referral UK version 1, but it doesn't stop there, and PlaceCube and others are raising important points as they go along, and aspects of data which it would be worth interchanging, which we hope will be added to the standard over time, but with the agreement of a community of suppliers. And I'm hoping that the beta work of the MHCLG Open Community Project will feed into that and be part of that structure. And we'll have an ongoing process for maintaining the standard. Some of the things Ian's described, I would say, are local enhancements for a product. And although this is a data interchange standard, and you can hopefully pick one of many suppliers that support this standard, individual suppliers will add their own features. Like I know the PlaceCube directory is very strong in terms of workflow and a records approval process. And it will always be the case that there are local enhancements within a tool, and you'll pick your service directory according to features like that it adds locally, although one hopes that the data that's interchanged and that's important to all systems will be according to a common standard, which will evolve as steered by key players such as PlaceCube.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mike. I think it doesn't look like there's any more questions coming up, but I think it's probably about time to wrap now anyway. So I just want to thank all of you for taking the time out to join this session. It's very much appreciated. Special thanks to Mike, Ian, Kev, Linda and Ken on the panel. Thanks for sharing your perspectives and your insights and for fielding those questions. I really appreciate that. And finally, thank you, Nick, for facilitating all of this, giving us the opportunity to share the work that these guys are doing and continue to do, and give everyone the opportunity to see that. So thank you, everybody, and that's it from us.
That's great. Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Adam. Cheers now.
Linda.
Thank you
Singleton,
all.
good to see you in your little capsule there. Hope to see you in real life very soon. This recording will go online as part of the outputs. And there obviously are a number of excellent resources in the chat box, which I shall also copy and paste. I now bid you all farewell. Hope to see you in the next session this afternoon. Enjoy your lunch, whatever you're having. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, Nick.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Bye.
Take care, everyone. Bye now.